Srimati Manjari Didi first, and it's great doing it at this time. It's kind of late in England. It's 8 p.m., but this means we can get Hawaii in, as in Manjari, and we also have New Zealand as well at the other end of the time zone. So it's both sides of the Pacific are covered. Thank you for coming, Haripriya Didi. Lovely to have New Zealand represented. So Srimati Manjari Didi, I'm going to make an announcement a bit later, actually at the end of her presentation, which involves her. In fact, she instigated it all. She met the devotees in 1969, and she took Harinam in 71 and Diksha in 72. She actually met Srila Prabhupada in 72. And I always like to mention, and it's a reminder to myself, that my generation of devotees owes a great debt of gratitude to this generation of devotees, because without Srila Prabhupada, we would have nothing. And without he was the Angi, he was the, always go the wrong way around. He was the Anga, and without all these Angis, none of the devotional knowledge would have been spread around the world. So we owe a huge debt of gratitude, which Narayana Maharaj always taught us to express. Manjari then met Srila Gurudeva in 1995, went to live in Vrindavan in 96 and became a core contributor and sevak in GVP. And from 2005 onwards, and I'm really benefiting from this because we're going to announce the Rupa Goswami festival at the end of her presentation. But Gurudev started the Sri Rupa Goswami Tirabhav festival 30 years ago when he constructed Rupa Sanatana Mandir. And in 2005, he instructed Manjari Didi to do one in English, and she's been faithfully doing that this year. And really, we're riding on her shoulders, taking it onto Zoom this year. A big debt of gratitude for that, because it's a wonderful festival. So that savor is very beautiful, because it's the core, it's the heart of Gurudev's, it's the heart of his heart, actually, the heart of his mission, his relationship with Rupa Manjari, thus Rupa Goswami in this manifest world. So Didi, I don't want to take any more of your time. I'm very excited to hear your presentation, and my only lamentation is I cannot taste your incredible prasadam. Zoom doesn't allow that, but maybe one day even taste can travel down Zoom. Haribol, warm welcome.
Hare Krishna. Can you hear me?
Pretty good. Can you hear her okay, Tarini?
Yep.
Great.
Good. Okay. Ma Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti.Tv Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Naschachade Shatarne Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Radhikaya Priyatmane Shri Sriman Bhaktivedanta Narayaniti Namane Shri Krishna Dila Katane Sudaksham Audarya Madhurya Gunaistriyuktam Param Varanyam Purusham Mahandam Narayanam Tvam Shadasamam Vanchakalpa Turubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyavacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo So let's see. Gaurapriya a couple of weeks ago, she had a time when I spoke in Varsana. It was like, I think the first time I properly spoke for Srila Narayana Maharaj. One thing is when I met him in 95, Srila Prabhupada's appearance day. That was very amazing. And I was visiting Vrindavan at the time. And then in 96, he came to the Bay Area where I was living. At that time, I was at UC Berkeley. And soon after that, I came to India to initially to stay for just a year, but it turned out to be more than 20 years by his grace. And I started to go to the Keshivji Gaudiya Math, in going to all the classes that were there. And what struck me was what an amazing teacher he was. He was
Let's turn our videos
just
off.
Wonderful. Sometimes he was.
Manjari? Manjari?
Yes.
1 second. I'm going to ask everyone to turn their videos off to help with your bandwidth. Turn videos off.
You're gonna.
Yeah.
You want me to turn?
No, you keep yours on. If Nandini turns hers off, and we'll help with the bandwidth. But you keep yours on. Yeah, perfect. You keep yours on. That will help with the bandwidth. Carry on. Sorry, Didi. Carry on. No, yeah.
Okay. Anyway, you know, he would ask the brahmacharis, what's the difference between Gyan and Vigyan? And then he would randomly call somebody, you know, one of the brahmacharis that was sitting there, and they would be forced to stand up, and they'd have to explain what the difference between Gyan and Vigyan is. And if he didn't like it, he would just say, sit down, and called somebody else. And in this way, he was training them. He was very, very training them very well. If nobody got it, then he would explain this in his talk. And oftentimes, if you said something right, he would repeat it in his talk. That's how I learned how, you know, the different verses that I would use. If I got it right, like I'll think. I always hated to speak, still do. And
Didi, I'm afraid your bandwidth is very poor. Didi, you're going to need to turn your video off. The reception is not good.
But he took, so we would speak.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, my video. Okay.
Yeah, because the bandwidth.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's better. Carry on.
Okay. All right. It kind of makes it easier. So I would have to speak about Srila Prabhupada. He would expect me to on Prabhupada's appearance day, Prabhupada's disappearance day, and Vishwarup Mahotsava. And so, which was the day that Srila Prabhupada took sannyas at the Keshivji Gaudiya Math. So then so one Vishwarup Mahotsava, I was speaking, and he wasn't really pleased with what I was saying. And he started to ask me questions. When did your Guru Maharaj take sannyas, and how did he preach? And you know, it's like he was asking me these questions, which really I should have been covering in my talk. And then at one point he says, what was the internal mood of Swami Maharaj? And I looked at him, and I was just like, kind of my mouth dropped open. I said, you know, the internal mood of Srila Prabhupada. I said, I can't answer that, Maharaj. And so then he turned to me and he said, sit down. And so I went back and I sat down, but I couldn't believe that he was asking me that. And so my husband Navayovana, I said to, you know, he asked me this, and he said, oh my God, we should talk to him. So we went back the next day at 6 o'clock in the morning, and so back from the morning walk, and as soon as he saw me, he understood why I was there. He would come, and in a few minutes, he brought a chair and he sat down, and he called me and he said, yes, go. And then I said, Maharaj, I said, you asked me to God, but how can I speak about this when I've never experienced the internal mood of Srila Prabhupada? And he turned to me and he looked and he said, the is so high. And he motioned with his hands. He raised his hands up and he said, it is so high. He said, Swami Maharaj. And then he stopped and he said, but that doesn't mean that we cannot speak about it. He said, we can speak about the internal mood of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And that's all he said. And I understood. I understood what he meant. And it was a revelation to me. The next time I got to speak, it was in Varsha. And that was the Srila Prabhupada. And so what, and then I said, understand this internal mood by understanding that Srila Prabhupada is a Rupanuga. He's the foremost of the followers of Srila Rupa Goswami. And Rupa Goswami, we know, Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhuttam. We know that Srila Rupa Goswami desires Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And therefore he was able to establish his mission in this
Manjari.
world.
Manjari. Didi.
This is the
Didi. Haribol.
way that Srila Prabhupada translates that. And yes, yeah.
Didi. The quality is going down, and it's such a beautiful sharing. Do you think you could log off and come back on? maybe you could establish a better line.
Okay.
We'll hold here. Just log off and come back in. Yeah. Hopefully it'll just be a better connection.
Yeah. Okay.
So if you just leave the room and come back in on the same link.
I hope I can come back.
Yeah, you'll be. Yeah, you will. We hope you can. We're going to be praying because it's beautiful. So bear with us, everybody. She'll be in no time at all. Hopefully with a better quality connection. Dandavat Shishara. I know the Vaishnava's prayers are very powerful, so. Is that her? Yes, she's back. Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to turn my video off. You turn your video off. Let's carry on.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay. So, anyway, so I was saying that just like Rupa Goswami understood the Manabhishta of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and therefore he was able to establish his mission in the Western world. I mean, establish his mission in this world. So Srila Prabhupada, because he also, following Srila Rupa Goswami, he understood this Manabhishta of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Because of that, he was able to establish Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission in the Western world. And then what is this Manabhishta of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? And we can understand from Rupa Goswami and Arpita Chirim Chira, Karunaya Vitirna Kalo, Samarpaitum, Nato Jala Rasam Swabhakti Shriyam, like this. And so this is the way that I spoke. And Maharaj liked it very much. He was, because he knew I understood what he was saying. And then he made me speak every time. So in this way, he was teaching what is essential and what we should learn. And I wanted to talk about the editing work, some of the things that I learned in editing. When I first went to Vrindavan, or when I first moved there, that was in 96. Soon afterwards, Gaurapriya, my god sister, introduced me to a devotee who was working on Jaiva Dharma. And I began to help him with the editing of Jaiva Dharma. Previous to that, I had been going to the Mathura Math and listening to all the classes. And Srila Gurudeva was, it was like I was just observing, and then he was also just observing. But as soon as I began editing, our relationship changed, and it especially changed from his part, and it was almost like when I began that editing, I became his. He began to instruct me on how to do things. He began to ask questions about my living situation. You know, is there association where I'm living? He began to kind of like direct things in my life. And I could see a definite change, and it began with the editing. Gradually, I worked on many books, practically all the books, but at some point I began to work on Rasamrita. This is the first volume when Tirthapad was doing it. Tirthapad asked me to do chapter 5, which is about the Pandavas. And I reached this part where it said that the Pandavas had received part of the mercy of the Lord. And I couldn't really understand what that meant. They had received part of the mercy of the Lord. I was in Hawaii at the time. I was visiting Hawaii. I was visiting my family. And and Gurudeva was at the North Shore. So I went out and first I was asking, I think Giridhari and Jiva were there. Jiva is now Vishnu Maharaj. And so I was asking them, because their Hindi is better than mine, I brought the book and we were looking at it. And what does it, what is the word? What does it mean to receive part of the mercy of the Lord? And I know this is a question because even in the BBT, there's a paragraph that talks about what it means to receive part of the mercy of the Lord. And that's not in the Tika, because they were also asking the same question. And so the word was amsidar. And so they couldn't figure it out. And so Jiva said, we should ask Gurudev. And so we went and we asked him, and he looked at amsidar and he said, no, this is a wrong translation. And so then he explained it to us in English. He explained us what amsidar means. And we couldn't understand it. He was explaining it in English, but we both couldn't understand what he was saying. And I'm not even sure now why we couldn't. So he looked at us and he saw we didn't understand it. And so he explained it again. And again, we couldn't understand his definition. And then at that point, he began to get frustrated with us. And he said, amsidar. He said, Madhav Maharaj is my amsidar. And so he, whatever I want, whatever. Yeah, he knows whatever I want. And then at that point we got it. It means representative. And so when I went back to the book and I rewrote it according to that definition, then it became clear that it wasn't that the Pandavas received a part of the mercy of the Lord, but it was that they were a part of the mercy of the Lord. And it's a completely different perspective. But this is how he was so wonderful. Whenever we reached, whenever we had questions like that, he was able to answer it and to reveal so much. Then there was another part in the PureBhakti.Tv. I would write him questions sometimes. I would save the questions until they were questions that I felt only he could answer. And so I would write him letters. And I would sign the letters, your Beti. He would always answer, my dear, darling sister. Because that was, technically kind of a relationship. But, that I would always sign your Beti. And so he got to the point where he would sign it, my dear, darling daughter and sister, like that. So the question I asked was, it was about Gopakumar. Now, Gopakumar goes to Indraloka, and he worships Lord Vamandev very personally when he becomes Indra. Vamandev is like his little brother, and he gets to serve him and he gets to feed him, and Lord Vamandev relates to him like a younger brother to an older brother. And so that's very, very sweet. And when he goes to Maharloka, he's worshiping Yageshwar. And he's feeding Yageshwar. And Yageshwar appears from the sacrifice. And he has a relationship with Gopakumar. And Gopakumar loves it. He goes to Satyaloka, and there's Lord Vishnu. Lord Vishnu is like a father to him. He's like a son. And he's able to be so close to Lord Vishnu. At one point, Lakshmi Devi holds him just like a child in her arms. So all of this, yet Gopakumar receives prem at the end of the 3rd chapter. Much, after he's been to the Brahma Jyoti, and to Shiva Loka, and to these Metta Vishnu Dutas. Then he returns to Vrindavan, and he receives prem by the grace of his Guru. The thing is, why didn't, he had these relationships with the Lord before, yet he hadn't achieved prem. So that was my question to Gurudev. So why didn't Gopakumar get prem before? And so he said that one receives prem through Ashraya Tattva, and not Vishaya Tattva. So the Vishaya Tattva is the Lord, but one receives prem through the devotees of the Lord. Now he said that actually Lakshmi Devi and Lord Shiva are Ashraya Tattva, and they could have given him prem. But because they knew that he was destined to get it by the grace of his Gurudev, then they didn't, and who was none other than Lord Narayana himself, the Lord himself. But it's his Gurudev, that they, because they knew this, they didn't bestow it upon him. And so it was so wonderful to read that. And he was able to explain these things to me. These are just a few, but there's so many, in so many wonderful ways. I was able to understand so many things. Then I was also in Hawaii. Yashodanandan Prabhu. May I continue speaking? I don't know how long my time is.
Oh, sure. You got about, take another 5 minutes. Is that okay?
Okay. All right. I just wanted to talk about it was here in Hawaii. It was in 2005. At that time, there was the University of Hawaii had a philosophers conference, and it was the summertime, and I was working on, no, actually it was before summer, it was May. I was working on the coordination of that conference. And so I would go and see Gurudev. And it just struck me that we had this huge conference going on. You know, it's like people from 35 countries, you know, more than 200 speakers. And then they're talking about philosophy. And there were many people from India, and there were people speaking about Indian philosophy. And it was practically solidly Advaita Vedanta. And even there were a couple Vaishnavas in the group, but they were speaking about analytic philosophy or something else, but they weren't speaking about Vaishnavism. And they themselves were Vaishnavas. I met them. And so because I was working on the conference, I was going to see Gurudev regularly. I would tell him about this. And I was saying, there's a need for a Vaishnav conference. And I remember at this point when I said that, he looked at me, and it was like he didn't say anything, but he looked at me like I was missing something very important. And I looked at him and I said, "Oh, you're doing that." He said, "The Rupa Goswami conference," because since the opening of the Rupa Sanatan Gaudiya Math, Srila Gurudev had started a 3-day conference at the Rupa Sanatan Gaudiya Math, glorifying Srila Rupa Goswami. There's Julan and there's Rupa Goswami's disappearance day. And then there's 1 or 2 days after that, before Balaram Purnima. In that interim, he would have the major sannyasis from all the mats in the Vrindavan area, the Sanskrit Pandits, the best of the Sanskrit pundits come and speak, and also people from different sampradayas would come and speak, glorifying Srila Rupa Goswami. And this was an event. It was in Vrindavan, the Hindi conference is so respected that it's well known amongst the Pandas and the Goswamis that if you go there, you had better know your philosophy. Otherwise, you'll be called out, because it's not only the other speakers who are knowledgeable, but the entire audience is knowledgeable. I mean, you can imagine that every year they have this speaking about the glories of Rupa Goswami, and the devotees are hearing for year after year. And there's a large gathering. They are so knowledgeable, the most knowledgeable audience in the whole world. And so the speakers have to really be up to snuff, and they know it. We've had many speakers decline because they don't think that they're good enough. These are famous people. So this is the Rup Sanatan program, and Maharaj had this 3-day Hindi program, and I realized at that point that this is it, that he has a conference on Vaishnavism, because Rupa Goswami is like the theologian of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. And so he was able to bring all these people together. So then I proposed that we do the English. We do it in English. And he liked the idea very much. And so from that time, when I went that year, I was actually 75. I went back, 2005. I went back to Vrindavan, and we began the conference from that year. And it's been so wonderful. It gets better and better every year.
Manjari, we're going to need to bring it to a close, I'm afraid.
So I just wanted to show you this one. I'm going to start the video just for a second. Mm-hmm. See this book? This is the distinctive contribution of Srila Rupa Goswami. Mm-hmm. And then on the opposite side, it's in Hindi. He loved this book. It was, we presented it to him in 2007. But I can't tell you, he was very, very happy to receive it. And so anyway, we are very grateful. He's given so much. And following, this is, he's taught me really, I feel like through Srila Gurudeva, I've come to understand what Srila Prabhupada wanted me to learn. And this is, so I feel like nothing can be more valuable than this. He's given me the service of Rupa and Sanatan. He's given me everything. He's taught me what I should do. So anyway, thank you very much, Prabhu.
Manjari, Didi, that was absolutely beautiful. If you could put your video on, I just wanted to say a couple of words of appreciation. I think the rest of the devotees present would echo my sentiments by saying that we could listen to you for a long time. I think you should do, audiobooks, because you have a great voice for stories. But one of the things that struck me by what you were telling us, and it's something that hit me a few years ago when I was reading Srimad Bhagavatam, is I suddenly realized that everything is Sambandha. And actually, Abhidheya leads us to Sambandha. Prayojan is all about Sambandha. Everything is Sambandha. And when Srila Gurudev asked you what is the internal mood of Srila Prabhupada, he was really trying to ask you what are the relationships that this personality has in the spiritual world. And when you gave examples, when you beautifully said that when you started editing, that you felt that you became his. And then you gave us examples, and you gave us some really beautiful examples, 3 examples, one of which the translation issue with the Pandavas. It wasn't that they received a part of the mercy, but it was that they were a part of the mercy of the Lord. That, for one. Secondly, that you kept on referring to him, to Gurudev, as you wanted to be his daughter, not his sister. So he signed off daughter and sister, and which is very personal, very sweet. And then thirdly, how Gopakumar, the route to praying, was via the Vaishnava, not directly to Bhagwan. All these three elements inculcate us in our hearts with an understanding of Sambandha, of the relationship that we want to cultivate through our sadhana and through our seva with our Gurudev, with Parampara, and ultimately to our journey home. So the way in which you wove the Vani and the Vapu relationship you had with Gurudev was absolutely magical. And I'm sure everybody here deeply appreciates you sharing that with us.